Testing. Today is Monday, October 2nd, 2023, and we'll call the meeting to order at 5:35 p.m. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance If we could all remain standing for just a minute, we're going to do a moment of silence for Jeremy Dix, whose wife is a Lewiston Public Schools student, and he passed away this weekend. Sorry, teacher. Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is school committee member introductions, and we'll start with Counselor Scott.
Lynn Scott, Lewiston City Council Representative.
Paul Beauplan, Ward 7.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Ashley Medina, Ward 5.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1.
Megan Parks at large.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3 is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that members would like set aside? Seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted. Public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personnel matters, or a student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee and be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, and affiliation to Lewiston Public Schools. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? If you can just push the button that has the head and the little lines next to it.
All set? Okay. My name is Alicia Escobar. Everybody calls me Lisa. I am a licensed alcohol and drug counselor, certified clinical supervisor, currently working with Lewiston Public Schools. I am here because I am requesting that an item get put on the agenda for in the very near future. I would like to be able to give students Narcan, naloxone, if possible. So I am struggling with the fact that I have some students coming to me who are using opiates and they are very at risk of overdose. And I'm not able to provide them with this thing that could potentially save their lives. There are also students who have family members at home who are at high risk of overdose. With that being said, we also have a lot of students who are using marijuana who, if they're getting it from the street, there's a very, very high percentage that it's laced with fentanyl. So, and I would also like to bring to everyone's attention, and I believe, I don't want to misspeak, but I do believe that LD 1315 is now a law. So what that means is it's an act to require public schools to offer training for secondary students on the administration of naloxone. So if that could be put on the agenda in the very near future, I would appreciate it because time is of the essence. I know that you don't see what I see every day, but Lewiston is very, very affected by the opiate epidemic. And I can't even really put into words how affected, but being in my position, I see it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I don't, does anyone have any questions for Lisa?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Being a teacher, I have a handout.
Thank you.
Good evening, good evening, school committee members. My name is Jay Rich, and I am a teacher of multilingual students at McMahon and the president of the Lewiston Education Association. Last year, I brought forward the idea of starting meetings with the land acknowledgement to continue the work of equity at Lewiston Public Schools. Many universities, organizations, and school boards across Maine start each meeting with a land acknowledgement. Land acknowledgements are a small way to recognize the original stewards of land and territories in the United States and Canada that were forcefully taken by European settlers. In Maine, we acknowledge the Penobscot Nations and other Wabanaki territories. Land acknowledgements are brief, important, and take as much time as the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to suggest the idea of starting school committee meetings with a land acknowledgement. This is an opportunity for LPS to be a leader in the effort to recognize history and land originally belonging to Native tribes. Since we recognize Indigenous Peoples Day next Monday, I'd like to ask the committee to consider reading a land acknowledgement. Thank you for the work you do for LPS and considering this important topic. I've listed an example of the land acknowledgement LEA uses at meetings and some additional resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to follow up, we did have a brief conversation about that before the meeting, and we're just trying to determine if it's a policy change or if it's something that we can just enact. So we're working on it. Thank you. And
Good evening, Tim Gallant, Lewiston. I was here last meeting when you all discussing maybe getting rid of the video live feed to the public, and I'm here to speak about that just for a minute. I feel it's very beneficial. I think it's very important for the public to have that as well and have a copy if they want to get online and check it out. I think what you want to improve attendance, I've seen that and heard that from different people. Policy might be, or a way to do it is to have the school, the Friday before the meeting, send out the minutes to families and invite them. They don't get any notification about this meeting here. I've talked to dozens of families and people about it. No one knows you're here unless they either have an issue that was brought to them personally. So it might be a way for you guys to do that, to send out a mass email. I know it's something the school can do probably fairly easy, and say the school board's meeting on Monday night and this is the agenda, just to promote some of that, or if nothing else, to promote them to watch at home if they can't come because they have children. Also, your seating arrangement, nothing, I really dislike it. Can't see anything from back here, that maybe you all can figure out a better way to sit so we can see everyone and see what's going on. That little screen over there is pretty small, not much bigger over here. And from my seat, I can't tell anybody in this corner and what's happening. I would think with today's technology that we ought to have a better way for that to happen and to work. I got to believe in a school this large, there should be a building or a space that can be used to be more acceptable for audience and people to come, as well as you guys, be more comfortable. So, and like in a normal meeting, looking across at each other, you're not looking down the end of the table at what's going on. So I would suggest that you might want to look into that. I think it's pretty important. And it also helps to make sure people are working together and what's going on. I would talk to somebody about this in the school system, and they said, well, the cost, keeping custodians here late at night to have to clean up and move and arrange things. I worked at a school district for 5 years. And what we did is we had them come in for an hour early in the morning, offset them sitting around 2-3 hours, and maybe not doing anything, if that's the case, if that's a worry. I don't know if that is, but that would be something to consider to keep the cost down, because people want to watch their nickels today. So thank you very much and have a great evening.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll continue with the agenda. Oh, awesome. The mic is still on. Thank you. Agenda item number 5 is to recognize Lewiston Public School staff, and Superintendent Langless will present.
Excuse me, some folks were not able to be here tonight, and I can certainly appreciate that with people's busy schedules. But some were able to join us tonight. But recently we had, as you know, another disturbing event at Longley Elementary School. I know that I was at home with my family on a Saturday night, and I got the message from Bill Grant, who had driven down here from his home and wanted to check on things to make sure everything was okay. But between him and other leadership and just the team of folks that we have here at Lewiston Public Schools, when I stopped by Sunday morning, not too late in the day, it was done. And it was done because people came together, just said, what do you need? When do you need it? And they really cleaned up quite a mess. And I know that teachers had to take some time, and it was a high emotion thing for them to try to put their rooms back together that they put so much time into creating for a learning space. But there's a group of folks back here, and I'll say some names here in a minute, but it's not just this event. It's whenever we need it. It's coming together to get the front of schools ready for the start of school. It's making sure the floors are done. For people to put their classrooms back together. It's the maintenance pieces, the facilities pieces, and I don't think people realize just how much try to say it politely here, mess on a day-to-day basis that 5,600 kids can make. And all the staff and all the movement of wet, sand, grass, pollen, you name it, wood chips. The high school, you get the little rubber pellets from the field after gym class, that kind of stuff. So wanted to bring that group of folks in who came in on a Saturday night and a Sunday morning, I think around 6 a.m. to just make sure that building was up and running, with people being able to put stuff back together for Monday classes. We couldn't do it without them, and it's not an easy thing for them to do, but really, really appreciate them. So if I could, I'd like to just say some names here. And again, this is part of the team that was there Saturday night, Sunday morning after that terrible mess that was made. But these folks and their colleagues are there every day, and we're really appreciative of them. So if we could just have you all come up, and we'll give you some paper here and take your picture. And we got Ray Roy, Greg Bradford, Jacob Noyes, Brandon Gothier, Michael Raymond, Richard Rafferty, who couldn't be here tonight, Jim Karen, who couldn't be here tonight, but we'll get them their certificates.
Josh didn't get a certificate. Oh, can't go without a picture.
Stand next to me.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Next is to review the status of LHS vision of the graduate work. And I'm guessing Principal Radke will be presenting. I haven't verified that yet, but judging by the fact that he's standing up, that's going to be a yes.
Good evening. I'm John Radke. I'm the principal at Lewiston High School. And I just wanted to introduce this, and then I will turn it over to Marissa Deku, who can walk you through the specifics. This has to do with our decennial accreditation process. And one of the things that they ask of all of the schools is that they come up with a vision of the graduate. That's part one. Part two is, which we have not done yet, and Marissa will let you know about that, is to talk about how we would assess that and what that actually looks like when it comes into real life. So that piece is still there. So I'll have Marissa walk you through the process of how we got this far, and happy to there'll be an opportunity for input as we sit down and figure out what would this look like in students. And if you have any other input, I'm happy to listen. So Marissa.
Good evening. As John said, I'm Marissa Deku. I'm the high school librarian, but one of the co-chairs for the NEASC process, which is a self-directed part where teachers or some type of staff, it's not administration that leads this charge, just so you know why I'm presenting this. So we started this process back in April of 2022 with a group of the House of Representatives. And so that means that there is a student from each of our advisories. So roughly about 80 to 90 students that we started this process with. We came out of those meetings. We did a roundtable, and I'll show the questions in a moment. With those groups. And at the end, we probably had about 4,000 data points. So we took those data points and really narrowed them down. And we also in April did a staff and faculty survey. And that included not only our staff, but the Next Step staff, because the Next Step students do receive a diploma from Lewiston High School. So it's not just the high school students. Following that, all DA students were provided a survey, and we kind of were narrowing down those 4,000 data points. If anyone wants to see those, I'm happy to share, but it's quite intense. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. So the 4 questions that we asked, and we asked the same 4 questions of every group so that we were using that same data, is what skills do you think you need when you leave the high school? How will you know Lewiston High School has prepared you for life? What does success look like to you after high school? And what is something you wish you were taught, but isn't being currently taught? So those questions came up with lots of different data, some of them very similar, some very different. The number one, if anyone wants to know, is taxes. I still haven't figured that one out. But it was definitely a telling experience that taxes was the number one that the students came up with. If you want to go to the next slide. In November of 2022, we had our full accreditation visit. Some of you are part of some small group meetings for that. And that the vision of the graduate, some schools kind of decide they throw something together, they present it, but we really wanted to be authentic in this, and they were okay with us not presenting it during that visit. So we had the data points, but we hadn't really finished the picture of what this was going to look like. So then in the winter of 2023 and into the spring of 2023, we had our small steering committee group. that worked on the design that you see here. And one of the things that we really tried to work with as we were putting this together was something that was kind of easy to remember for both staff and students. Number two, that it was an easy look to be translated so that all families are able to see this. And if you go to, I think the next slide, so that's the English version. And I just put 2 of the languages if you want to go to the next one. And you'll see just how kind of easy and it looks the same. We really we use the thesaurus a lot. We really were trying to work on how this would look in different languages. So that's where we are at. And then as Mr. Radke mentioned, the next step really is to come up with an evaluation tool. And NEASC does provide training for our small group that has been working on this. And we would work with both administration, people from Dingley as well, as we look at how this is evaluated for our students. If you want to, there's, I think, and then the next action steps, like I said, is that evaluation tool. So that's what we have to present. And as Mr. Radke said, if there are any comments, questions, either myself or him can answer.
Member Hurd.
Thank you. Can you go back to the 4 questions for one quick sec? If that's possible. Yeah. So for the first one, what skills do you think you would need when you leave high school? Have we ever thought, not that you haven't done a ton and you had like 4 million points or whatever, but did we ever think about maybe reaching out a little bit farther and asking like past graduates the same question? Because maybe there's something, and maybe worded a little differently. Is there something you would have liked to see at the high school that could have better
Yes.
prepared you?
So we did question some alumni, parents as well, and some community members. It was a much smaller, it's harder to really, capture a lot of that. I don't know how many alumni are on staff right now, but I mean, I'm an alumni myself. There's quite a few of us, and there were a lot of us that were, thinking back to when we graduated, what we felt was missing. So a lot of us put those 2 hats on as well. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
In any of the questioning, did students mention adding a community service graduation requirement? I know a lot of schools do that, and I think that's a really important piece that we're missing here in Lewiston.
The students did not express that. I don't know if,
Some staff,
yes,
some staff mentioned it, but students, it wasn't on their radar screen.
no.
Remember, this was, when we were just coming out of, it was before I arrived here, so we were still just coming out of the whole oddness that was COVID.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Member Scott?
Thank you. So what's the timeline on finishing up some of this work? Is there specifics?
We're waiting for the training that's to come. They haven't posted when that training will be. Usually they do one in the fall, but I haven't seen that listed yet. If not, it would be like maybe early winter in like January or February. And then at that point, we would work on the rubrics.
The NEASC would like an update on May 1st.
Okay. So we're looking, I guess what I'm really asking is if we're going to get this kind of information, and I think that we should continue to get this information even as the process is moving forward, maybe even from new students, but we want to make sure that we have a timeline for following through with getting this information so that we can incorporate it. And because as a graduate myself, in 86, I would have liked to learn about taxes, and that was a long time ago. So yes,
Agreed.
thank you.
Anything else? Thank you both very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Agenda item number 7 is a report from the school committee chair, and I do not have anything to report out tonight. 8 is report from the superintendent.
Don't have a ton of new information from last week when we met. As you know, we've had some things pop up often off school hours in the last week or so that we've had to work through around students making comments to other students, threat assessment type things. And so we've worked through those, as you know. I've kept you on the loop. But gosh, we got to find a way to continue to work on safety in our community, especially as it relates to really a lot of BB guns right now. But BB guns that don't look like toys, that present as weapons. And not that BB guns are not dangerous, but the ones that we have been working with or trying to sort through the different information on have been very real BB guns that could, I think, present a life-threatening situation, especially as it relates to a response. Lewiston Police Department has been head and shoulders above the call of duty, I think, in working with them. They have helped do some things recently that's just all hours of the night. I know of someone who last week spent somewhere in the nearly I'm doing math in my head real quick, somewhere around 6-7 hours overtime on one given day to help us resolve a matter that they were pursuing. And they had the information, so it made sense that they kept going. And so we're really appreciative of that. And still have to have some conversations, but at some point I'd love to bring them in front of the committee to thank them publicly for their work to just keep our kids and staff safe. But we've definitely had some things, and I know the school committee has made some commitments to have executive sessions where we talk about some student disciplinary matters coming up here on the 16th and also the 18th. We have some things that kids can't do in school, and so we have to address those, and we'll work through them. But I think that's the biggest update for me in the current moment. I want to share, big, pleasant, awesome things as well. But I guess I would drop that LRTC had quite an article in the paper here recently about their new programs over in Auburn. Just to remind the world that those live in the new Edward Little building, but those are being facilitated and run by our staff and our leadership, and they're doing a great job from moving kids over there and back all the way up through the new programming. So if you could check that out. But we're off and running. Today or yesterday, actually, we shared some updated bus runs. Again, trying to tweak things and get them to be better. And so we're getting feedback on that. I think there's room for growth there. And I think next year will be a whole lot better because everything will be front loaded into the software that is new to us this year. So I know there's some frustrations out there, but also a shout out to our transportation staff that have done some things that nobody sees happening in front of them when they're sitting with their child, waiting for the bus or looking out the window, waiting for it to come back. But kids are getting to and from school, and that's getting better.
I heard some feedback in the community that bus runs or bus stops had been eliminated because the students that lived at those or were getting on at those stops were playing fall sports. And now that those fall sports are ending, they are concerned that their bus stops will not be added back. Do you know anything about that?
So that's an ongoing process throughout the year, but we actually surveyed high school students and asked them, are you going to be taking a bus in the future? So that door is still open. We would ask parents to make sure you're in communication with our transportation office if that's the case. But we also had some scenarios where kids are getting picked up at 6:30 in the morning, and then the bus would get to the high school and sit for 10 minutes, waiting for them to be able to get off the bus because of timing. And that was because there was multiple stops and there was never a kid there. So we try to refine those as we go, but we can put things back as needed.
Perfect. Thank you. Member Eames?
I think yesterday was the census day. Do we have a number now for our current enrollments?
So the October 1 reporting, is that what you're referencing? So that is a big to do, which is actually being done now. So actually had a conversation earlier today about 26 students that another district is saying they go to school here. But we don't have any documentation to that effect, although we look at the records for attendance and they're not attending here. And so we just have to dot those I's and cross those T's, and that's common this time of year. And the October 1 report actually has some time before it's submitted, but you're right, it will be coming here pretty soon once those, what happens, the state uses a system called Synergy, and one student can only exist in one place. And so when both schools claim that name with a student ID number that is state specific, it pops up with some anomalies and we have to resolve those, and those go both ways. So it's common this time of year. That's part of what we do. And we just had day 1 for our new student information systems person, and his name is Mark, and seems like a pleasant man, and he's jumping in.
Any other questions or comments for the superintendent? Agenda item number 9 is report from the city council president.
Thank you. I'll just report that we do have a meeting tomorrow evening. We start at 6 o'clock with 2 executive sessions. Our regular meeting begins at 7. We have several special amusement permits to discuss. We'll also be discussing our first public hearing and possible passage of contractually rezone the properties at 128 Farwell Street and 255 East Avenue from Neighborhood Conservation A. This, I believe, is going to be a big discussion as there's been a lot of feedback from that neighborhood about possible changes in that area. We also have public hearing and approval for amendments to the general assistance policy for annual authorization of eligibility amounts, amendments to the athletic field use policy, public hearing and approval of the Lowell Street tax increment financing district, and some condemnation hearings on a couple of pieces of property. And that is it. I'll report out what happens at our next meeting.
Thank you. Do we have any updates from school committee, subcommittees? Member Bowden?
Thank you. Linda, if you want to jump into, did you bring the paperwork?
I did.
Yeah, so the finance committee did meet and we just went over the August finances and where they're at. We got a pretty cool breakdown, like line for line of what we were looking at. And I don't know, did you bring that to pass out to everybody?
So we're going to put on the next agenda so people
Okay.
can see August and then September. So you can see that big difference between that month that doesn't have certain activity because teachers are not on payroll yet, and then the month that starts it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so we'll have
we'll do
a good,
that
we'll have a
probably.
breakdown then in the next meeting, but that was, go ahead, Linda.
And I did ask that if Adam Hanskin could come to us, because he gave Member Bowden and I a really good breakdown on how to read these reports and what each number means and each column means. So we did ask him to come to our meeting and maybe just give us a couple of minute rundown on how that works, so that as we are getting these reports on a regular basis, we're all understanding where the financials stand. And I think it's going to make a significant difference through budget season, understanding where the numbers are and all of that. So that's it.
Anything else? Member Popolat?
Thank you. Jen Labonte published for curriculum, the schedule and calendar for the math standards design team. The first meeting will be October 17th. And I'm confident between Dr. Eames and myself, we can cover those meetings, though math isn't either of our fortes. So I don't know how much we'll be able to contribute other than nod our head and say, sounds good.
Thank you. Member Eames?
Yeah, the policy subcommittee continues to meet regularly. You'll be receiving a bunch in your next packet. And we can see maybe we're getting to the place where we can start over again.
Thank you. You guys are good? Agenda item number 11 is school committee community announcements. Member Bowden?
Yeah, so I just wanted to, I feel like Principal Radke put this out there, but it sounds like NWEA testing starts at the high school this week. I'm not sure about middle or elementary schools, but that is on my radar. Does it start tomorrow, Principal Radke?
One group, it's not everybody all at once.
Okay, no, it's okay. Just for the for the people at home, they probably want to hear this. Yeah.
It's not everybody all at once in one room. So it happens in English classes and math classes spread out over the month as is doable.
Okay.
So I think we actually had some folks start today.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Any other community announcements? Future agenda items. Counselor Scott?
Thank you. So what I'm going to say is very serious. And so I am formally requesting that the school attorney look into the possibility that school committee members are discussing confidential information from executive sessions with our current city councilors and the legal ramifications that our district, if a school board member does this, could face. It has come to my attention that a current city council, along with 3 other councilors, were in a public setting last week where information about our school committee's executive sessions were specifically discussed, specifically disciplinary hearings and making reference to the number of hearings that were had, but also the color of the skin of the students before the committee in executive session. This is not the first time that a city councilor has made a public comment about something that was discussed in a school committee executive session. There was a comment that was made, I believe, during budget season about a specific gender of a student at the middle school that was also discussed in executive session and was brought up by a city councilor. We could have very serious lawsuits if executive sessions are discussed outside of confidentiality and especially when it may pertain to a student who is of the BIPOC community, especially after DOG findings previously had at our school. I ask that you speak with our attorney about this and set up as soon as possible a time that we can discuss this, not to be discussed tonight, but I believe that this is a very serious matter and it needs to be discussed and we should have it as soon as possible, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other future agenda items? Member Damon?
I'm just wondering how we're making out with getting our student reps on board.
I asked Principal Radke that before we started the meeting and he's working on it.
And
He looks surprised that I just said that, but we did just have that conversation.
just a real quick, I've already been in conversation with Assistant Principal Doug Dumont about working with the House of Reps, which is a group that's established at the high school to represent each classroom of DA students. And so that's the process we're looking at. We had talked about a larger group, maybe rotating through and bringing items to the committee as part of their work. And so right now that's where that's at. I actually think that's been scheduled. So it's coming up.
Great. Thank you. Any other future agenda items? The next item is to enter into executive session on a legal matter in accordance with 1 MRSA 4056E. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?